Hey everyone, so as you can tell, I am not in the studio and so much to talk about. All right, so I want you to think of this. This is huge news coming out of Judea and Samaria. We're going to look at this. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. Hebron's most powerful sheiks just took a sledgehammer to the decades of Palestinian politics and the world's tired two-state solution fantasy. Thank you, Donna, for sending that. In a signed letter to Israel's government, they pledged full recognition of Israel as the Jewish state. I mean, did you hear that? In Hebron, the Muslim sheiks, full recognition of Israel as the Jewish state. Zero tolerance for terror, breaking away from the corrupt Palestinian Authority, joining the Abraham Accords for peace, jobs, and prosperity. It's almost like, sounds like something like you can't make this up. But folks, we're going to get into that in just a minute. This is huge because I've been saying over and over, as has Don Stewart, that in order for Ezekiel 38 to come about, you have to have peace within Judea and Samaria. Avi Lipkin's been on my program several times, has talked about the problems in Judea and Samaria, specifically in Hebron and in Shechem, because of the terrorism that's there. And those areas have to be dealt with in order for Israel to dwell in peace and safety. Also, as Avi has said, listen, those areas will be dealt with. They are being dealt with. Roddy Harrell has said that many times. He's on my program tomorrow, by the way. Folks, we live in truly amazing days. I'm going to come back to that because I want to deal with a couple of things. One of them is a huge heartbreak. And so I want to make sure that I have this just a special note first. And look at what's happened in Texas with this flood. By the way, that is area where Craig and I had gone to Texas to meet with Hal Lindsey some time ago. Some years back, and the exact same area. We went there to a studio, had lunch with him, and a beautiful area, just beautiful area of Texas. And to see this horrible tragedy that has happened, that we're watching these soldiers that were killed in Gaza. Friends, there's tragedy after tragedy that's happening. We have, my heart just breaks. I was up at 2 a.m, and just wondering, as we talk about Bible prophecy, you guys watch Bible prophecy, right? As we go through this, do we understand the judgment of God that's going to come? Because right now, these aren't judgments in the sense of the remedial judgments, you can say, as Dr. David Reagan says, but the judgment of God of the tribulation period is coming. We are not there yet. And the reason why we do this is to wake people up. And people might mock and scoff right now at us. But friends, we know God's word. And that's what we hold on to. We say, okay, God's word is true. Listen to this. When the Bible tells us to wait, waiting patiently on the Lord for our going home, remember that term wait doesn't mean just sitting around. It means to live in a state of preparedness. How can you live in a state of preparedness, as the Bible tells us to, if we don't pay any attention to the prophecies that are in the Bible? So I want to commend you, y'all, because you do. And this is what we do. We say, no, we're going to live in a state of preparedness. This is what God wants us to do. So as we look at what happened in Texas, we see Gaza, we see the anti-Semitism that has been happening. There's a global intifada that's taking place. Europe, oh my goodness, you guys over in Europe, we are praying for you, but just watching what's happening there. And some of the things here in the U.S., the mayor in Texas, in New York, and some of the things in Texas. By the way, we have a conference coming up in Texas. Really excited about that. But also in Australia, wow, as we look to what has been taking place in Australia, friends, just think of this, right? So just absolutely horrific, absolutely sad as we look at what's been going on all over the world. And just some of the issues with this regarding Australia. I just want to read this to you. In one night, a synagogue was set on fire while 20 Jews were inside praying for Shabbat. It's just the other day. An Israeli restaurant was stormed by 20 violent protesters screaming, "Death to the IDF." This is after that concert over in Europe. And terrorizing families. Hours later, another business was found vandalized, its walls defaced, 3 cars torched outside. Wow, one night was enough to leave the entire Jewish community shaken, wondering if this city is still safe for Jews. This is not Nazi Germany 1930s. This is Australia 2025. And as Avi Lipkin said, excuse me, when he was on my program a couple of times, listen, there's a global Holocaust that's coming. A Holocaust, and he specifically focused on America, and he said to drive Jews back into, it will drive Jews back into the area of Judea and Samaria. I've asked him many times what's going to happen with Judea and Samaria. And he said, he goes, it's going to be handled, the terrorism there. And now we read this report that I read to you from the very beginning. And friends, I want to get into it, but again, my heart is just breaking as I'm watching more and more happening. We're seeing certain things I wasn't sure was going to happen. I just wasn't, friends, I just wasn't sure we would see some of the events that are taking place. And again, just devastating things, devastating sadness. But imagine the day when the judgment comes, because that day will catch many as a thief in the night. When they say peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them. And it'll be far worse than the flood that happened in Texas. The wars will be far worse than what's happening right now. Wow. But again, I want to focus on Hebron and what came out of the Wall Street Journal, because it's huge news. In a signed letter to Israel's government, this is what the sheiks, the most powerful sheiks in the Palestinian areas, Judea and Samaria, have said, in this Judea specifically, area of Hebron: full recognition of Israel as the Jewish state, zero tolerance for terror, breaking away from the corrupt Palestinian Authority, joining the Abraham Accords for peace, jobs, and prosperity. Listen, I read the entire article. It's very insightful. They're basically saying we're done with the PA, we're done with Hamas, we don't want this anymore. We want to live in peace with Israel. In the area of Judea, folks, this is remarkable. We have our Second Timers tour coming up in October, looking to go into those areas, and this is truly amazing to think of this. But I gotta mention this. So, in Bill Koenig's WilliamKoenig.com, his Eye to Eye report. This is by Tanya Koenig, his wife. She wrote this article, and listen to this. Based on everything we're witnessing right now, knowing that Netanyahu's come to the States right now, or in the States right now, getting ready for a meeting with Trump. She writes, the art of the trap, Netanyahu, Trump, and the geopolitical setup at the White House. In a carefully choreographed series of behind-the-scenes meetings, American and Israeli officials appear to be laying the final groundwork for what could be one of the most consequential diplomatic moves of the year, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expected to land in Washington for a brief 40-hour visit. Sources confirm that key decisions are being finalized now before the Prime Minister arrives. According to diplomatic sources with direct knowledge of the planning, the Saudi Defense Minister, Prince Khalid bin Salman, visited the White House in secret earlier the other day. The unannounced meeting focused on regional developments in the aftermath of the Israel-Iran conflict and the growing possibility of Saudi participation in a broader framework agreement. This was not a courtesy meeting, it was a signal. The Saudis are no longer observers, they are now strategic players in the normalization matrix. Trump is making his move. At the same time, within Israel, Likud ministers unanimously signed a letter urging Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring with him a signed sovereignty proposal covering parts of Judea and Samaria. According to a senior Likud source, we believe this is the moment. The international focus, the political momentum, everything is aligned. If we hesitate now, the opportunity may be lost. Again, you're looking at this, and then we start thinking of Judea and Samaria and what these sheiks have reported in the Wall Street Journal. Netanyahu's visit is being framed as both a strategic consultation and potential signature moment. The brevity of the stay underscores the intensity of the agenda. The White House is attempting to manage several moving pieces simultaneously ensuring regional calm after the 12-day war, coordinating hostage negotiations, and so forth. For President Trump, it represents a chance to reassert the Abraham Accords as the dominant diplomatic architecture of the region. Continues from there, it says, but the speed and precision of the maneuver have raised concerns among some Israeli observers who see a risk that political symbols may outpace strategic substance. Listen, in the article in the Wall Street Journal, it talks about finally in the areas of like Hebron, for example, the sheiks are saying, listen, we enter into a partnership and the Abraham Accords with Israel, we will finally be able to have good jobs in our land. We'll be able to work with Israel and we get rid of terrorism. Things are going to happen. Things are going to change. Listen, there's a promise of prosperity across the board, enormous prosperity with the Abraham Accords. And the question isn't whether this is good politics, this article goes on to say, it's whether it's durable and whether it's being done on Israel's terms. The optics are powerful, but they may also be deceptive. When negotiations are accelerated behind closed doors and the prime minister arrives to find the table already set, talking about the meeting with Trump Monday, the line between statesmanship and staging becomes dangerously thin. The trap is not confrontation, it's choreography. Could the art of the deal may now be giving way to the art of the trap? The promises of safety for man are a trap, wrote Solomon in Proverbs chapter 29, but it's the Lord who keeps us safe. Very fascinating. Keep that proverb in mind. Proverbs 29, verse 25. Tanya Koenig goes on and says, we have the authority of Yeshua to pray for Israel more than ever. Pray against the dividing of the land. Pray that every plan conceived by world leaders, even the most powerful man on earth whom we bless, President Donald J. Trump, would be interrupted if it contradicts God's covenant. We can pray to delay, to stop, and to invite divine intervention because this is his land and it is not a bargaining chip. In fact, Joel chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, God says, this is my land and my people. He says, anybody who seeks to divide the land will be judged. Wow. So again, I look at this, beginning with, it's saying, is it the art of the trap? The promises of peace and safety of man are a trap, Proverbs 29. But it's the Lord who keeps us safe. Folks, we live in truly amazing days. Pray for those folks in Texas. We just had the tragedy here in the States in Idaho with the fire and the shootings that happened there and the people losing their lives. We have the anti-Semitism that is growing everywhere. Folks, none of these things are a coincidence. All right, none of them are a coincidence. Indeed, it's the enemy who will set a trap for us. I encourage you to look up. I encourage you to be prepared. Listen, we have a couple of things coming up. We're going to be in Santa Barbara, California. Fantastic conference coming up there. Check it out at the website, hopeforourtimes.com, at the events also coming up in Texas. Check that out. Two completely different conferences, different messages, different speakers. Both are going to be great. And listen, we have two trips coming up to Israel in October. Two completely different types of trips. As I mentioned, one of the trips called Second Timers, and we're going into some areas that are totally off the charts. But join me tomorrow for Roddy Harrell from Jerusalem. But right now, listen, let's get going with the life of David. God bless you guys.
All right, let's roll. Lots to talk about here. So David, Absalom's rising up. You know where we left off if you've been with us. If not, you can catch up on the entire King David series that we have had. But let's get rolling. 2 Samuel chapter 15 we are going to be in this time. And things are going to start really getting ugly here with David. And by the way, don't forget, check out some of the events that we have going on. We're going to be in Texas coming up in September, the great state of Texas. And let us get rolling. So here we are, 2 Samuel chapter 15. One of the faith lessons that we're going to learn in this time here with David and 2 Samuel is this. It's a victory is not you overcoming sin. Victory is Jesus overcoming you. Let that sink in. And man, ain't that the truth? So David sinned against God. He is paying the consequences and is about to take a journey to a very difficult place. Jesus is overcoming David. Through Nathan the prophet, God told him that the sword would never depart from his house and adversity would rise from within his own home. Indeed, it has. Trouble has come to David. He's reaping the fruit of his sin. I'm not going to rehash all of that, but just real simple. Absalom is now rising up. Remember, we saw last time Absalom, he's this good-looking guy. The women were swooning over him. He just had everything going on. He had the charisma, he had the looks, he had the intelligence. But in that, his bitterness is growing towards his father David. His father David refused to let him see his face. I don't want to rehash all of that. But Absalom grew bitter toward his father. He began to win the hearts of the people toward himself, and he began to set himself up as the king and depose his father and even seek to kill his father David. No, he's not going to kill him tonight or in this message. Next time, in fact, he's not going to kill him at all, but he's going to try to. All right, but we'll get there. We'll get there, just not right now. We have a lot more that's going on here in chapter 15. By the time we get to chapter 15, David has been coerced to meet Absalom, so he reluctantly met with him. But in all this, we could sit back and say, so David brought all of this on himself. It serves him right, because we tend to do that. He brought it all on himself. Listen, my heart goes out to him because his world is literally going to fall apart. We started to see it fall apart, right? And we know it's because of his own error. Yet, how many of us have messed up? We confess our sin to God, and the consequences come, and we wish we had an opportunity for a do-over. I guarantee you, David wishes he had an opportunity for a do-over. In fact, we're going to see one of the verses that really implies that. We're going to see that in a few minutes, where we get the thoughts of David's heart. We'll get there. David wished he could have had a do-over. We wish we can have do-overs. We gotta deal with the chips. We gotta deal with the consequences. And our world is falling apart. Maybe not even because of ourselves, but because of someone else, right? We gotta trust in the Lord. David, his sin affected everybody else. Everybody else. It affected his kingdom. It affected his family. It affected his soldiers. It affected his kids. And I guarantee you, all started way back with Bathsheba. It's hard to believe it gets this bad because of what happened with Bathsheba. I guarantee you, when David was warned by his servant, hey, that woman's married, and David, he chose to sin anyways, I guarantee you David thought, what's the big deal? Her husband's gone. He's off fighting a war. He's never going to know. I'll demand my servant keeps his mouth shut. It'll be a good time with her. She's beautiful, and then we'll be gone. We'll be done with it. Nobody will ever know. Nobody's going to be affected by it. Whoa, everybody was affected by it. The whole kingdom was. And David himself, what a price to pay for sin. As we get to chapter 15, that's a new chapter on David's life. Let's see what happens. Verse 1, after this, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses after David had finally met good with Absalom and said, you can live here, you can have this territory, this is all yours. David even kissed Absalom and said, okay, we're good now. They weren't. David's just hoping. After this, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Servants, soldiers. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. And so it was whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision that Absalom would call to him and say, what city are you from? And he would say, your servant is from such and such tribe of Israel. And then Absalom would say to him, look, your case is good and it's right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you. It's just me, right? But I understand. I get it what you're saying. What you're saying is right. Verse 4, moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice. If I was in charge, right, we can see how this is going. Your case is good. I would take care of it. You can see he's starting to win everybody over. Verse 5, and so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him, and he would kiss him. In this manner, Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Wow. All right. So we start to get the idea of what in the world is going on. In chapter 14, we are told that from the sole of his feet to the crown of his head, there was zero blemish in him. In other words, he was a good-looking guy. The girls were like, wow, that's long, beautiful hair. We saw that last time, right? And he was smart, and he was cunning. And he uses his looks to his advantage to win the people to his cause and to overthrow his father and make himself king. If we were to summarize the words that we just read, and these aren't the exact words, but we can start to get the idea of them. But if we were to summarize them in this section, it begins with, if I were king, verse 4, if I were king, then I would make sure you had justice, right? He doesn't actually say that. Those aren't the literal words, but you can see the implication with everything that's going on here. And look how he wins the people over. Again, verse 5, and so it was whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take them, and he would kiss them. And as a result, verse 6, in this manner Absalom acted toward all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So you can summarize it. Again, these aren't the exact words, but it's kind of like this. If I were king, and then if you take it from verse 7 through 10, you say, I will be king. Again, this is just like a summary, but check this out, verse 7 through 10. And it came to pass after 40 years, or actually the Septuagint manuscript, Syriac and Josephus, I'll say 4 years, which makes a lot more sense. Now it came to pass after 40 years, or less, it's talking about 40 years of David's reign or something like that, but we know that's not the exact number here. So it's likely 4 years after. Now it came to pass after 4 years that Absalom said to the king, said to David, please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. Right? So we see how this works. For your servant took a vow while I dealt at Geshur in Syria. Remember when he lived at Geshur last time? He was there for, what was it, 3 years, I think it was, and then came back here for 4 years, or 4 years there and then 3 years in Jerusalem. Saying, I took a vow when I was in Geshur, saying, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. So understand what Absalom's doing. I want to go to Hebron because I made a vow to the Lord. This is a holy thing I want to do, Dad. And David said to him, go in peace. So he arose and he went to Hebron. And then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. In other words, Absalom is king. He's totally undermining his dad. So he's left Jerusalem, he's gone to Hebron. Remember, Hebron is where David first reigned over the tribe of Judah only. Now Absalom's getting all the 12 tribes. Wow. And with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem, and they went along innocently and did not know anything. In other words, Absalom's going to Hebron, let's go with Absalom. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. If we were to summarize what we've seen so far, it would be this. Absalom wins the people over. He says, if I were king, right, this is how things would go. I will be king. And then we summarize, putting all of this part together, I am the king. I am the king. He deceives his father David, and he receives his father's blessing. David even says, Absalom, go in peace. By the time you reach this part of David's life, he's probably about 65 years old. And looking back at his life, he's got regrets. But what's coming now that he's 65 is going to be the most difficult time of his life. The last words he says to his son Absalom are, go in peace. But there's nothing peaceful about it. He plotted to take the kingdom from his father. Absalom is making it clear, I'm going to overthrow my dad and take the kingdom, and I will even take my dad's life. I will kill him. Remember how the bitterness started? David would not deal with the horrible thing that happened to Tamar, Absalom's sister. Absalom said, I'm going to take matters into my own hand. My dad doesn't even comfort her. Absalom did. That bitterness grew. So here, verses 11 as well, we read about Ahithophel. So Ahithophel was David's trusted friend and counselor, but he turned against David, perhaps because Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather and was bitter toward David. So he would have known David has my granddaughter's husband murdered. So you start to see all this stuff with this background, everything going on. Absalom's this good-looking guy. He's got the personality. He's got the charisma. He's winning the people over. He's smart, and he even tells us here in chapter 15, he even won over the men. He already won over the women. Now he even won over the men. And David's getting into the most painful time of his entire life, yet David will grow closer to God than he has ever been before. He's much older now, but his love for the Lord and his faith will be exposed for what they are in his pain as genuine. God is squeezing out the yuck. He's getting rid of all the yuck. And his love for God is going to be proven, and God will prove his love for David, although it's going to be painful. Isn't it interesting? In the pain, God is going to show the love of God. Listen, has your world fallen apart? David's world's fallen apart. Has your world fallen apart? If you're in Christ Jesus, trust him. He will never leave you nor forsake you. He will never let you go, all right? So with all of this as a backdrop, note these three things as we meet David in the moment of his great defeat. Number one is the identification with the humbled king. In verse 13, now a messenger came to David saying, check this out, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. They've gone with your son Absalom. By the way, David, he wants to kill you. So David said to all the servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring disaster upon us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. David, all the people are turning with Absalom, and they're all going to come and kill you. So David says, we've got to flee the city. And the king's servants said to the king, we are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. If we've been with David for literally his entire life, his life suddenly shifts here. He enters into the fellowship of the sufferings of the Lord. Think of that. It was because of his sin, but he's entering into him, but God is bringing him so deep. I just like, oh my goodness, I would hate the thought of going into such a horrible and horrific place, even if you bring it upon yourself, right? In Philippians chapter 3, verse 10, Paul wrote about this fellowship with the sufferings of the Lord, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings. So David is going into that Old Testament style. Peter also wrote about it in 1 Peter chapter 4. Do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing has happened to you, but rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. The passage before us will become one of the saddest episodes in the whole Bible. David messed up, but to see the results is heartbreaking as he flees from his own son, Absalom. Perhaps the most heartbreaking thing is that David would have known it all started way back when. I saw that woman on a rooftop, and my friend told me, David, she's married, don't go there. And I didn't listen to him. In the words of one author, David is now being put through the fire, the testing by the hand of the loving God. God loved David too much to leave him how he was. So he was going to transform him. One of the hard things about knowing Christ is this: God transforms us in the pain. He molds us. Romans chapter 8, right? Behold, all things work together for good for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose, for he is shaping us, conforming us, molding us into the image of his son. He doesn't say all things are good, but he uses all things for good to conform us into the image of the son. The pressing, the molding, the shaping like clay in a potter's vessel, like the chiseling away of a sculptor. He's molding us into the image of his son. God loved David too much to leave him how he was, so he would transform him. Same thing with you and me. Herein we see a few people who are willing to identify themselves with this humbled king. He's in the palace, now he's got to leave. The true servants of David said, we are your servants, we just read it, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. So this is where we are, right? We choose to go where you go, David. Are you able to choose to go where the King of Kings says, here's where I'm taking you? To say, Lord, I want to go where you want to go. Lord, can I genuinely pray, Lord, I want you to direct my steps. And the steps are probably going to include some cleansing, but he's going to keep us. We need to remember that. So number 2, the second main thing is the dedication to the rejected king. Verses 16 through 18. Let's go there. Verse 16, where is it? Oh, I'm in the wrong chapter. Here it is. And then the king went out with all of his household after him, but the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Then all the servants passed before him, and all the Cherethites, all the Pelethites, and the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. Well, then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king. Return and remain with Absalom, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I go know not where? In other words, I don't know where I'm going. All I know is I'm fleeing from Absalom, who wants to kill me, my own son. Return and remain with Absalom, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. If David even calls him the king, return, stay with the king, the one who just made himself king in Hebron. David. In fact, he continues, but Attai answered the king and said, as the Lord lives, as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servant will be. So David said to Ittai, go and cross over. And then Ittai the Gittite and all his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron, and all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness. Oh man. Wow. Note who it is that surrendered with David, right? They know this is not going, we're all going to lose our homes. We're leaving. It's okay, I'm going with the king. What are we willing to surrender for the Lord when we know the Lord wants us to move? Listen, as David was forced out of Jerusalem, not many from the people of Israel went with David. Some did, like his servants, the original mighty men he had, Joab and the others went with him. But it's interesting, there's also another group here. It tells us in verse 18, 600 men from Gath. Who are they? Remember, Goliath was from Gath. It's from the area of Gaza, where Gaza is today. Who were these men? Years before, when Saul was chasing David, remember, David went to the Philistine area of Gath, the same place where the Goliath was from. And when David lived there, he has so much positive influence in the way of the Lord that these men left Gath with him and dedicated themselves to him. Isn't that interesting? When David left Gath, the area of the Philistines, there's men of the Philistines that went with David. Isn't that's rather intriguing, and talk about their dedication. Now that he's losing his kingdom, that means they're losing it if they go with him. If they stayed with Absalom, they would have been okay. But they go with David. They're being forced he's being forced from the throne. They're still dedicated to him. Whatever happened to their king happened to them, and they were good with it. It's a reminder of Christ who saves us. Whatever happens to our king happens to us, right? They persecuted me, they'll persecute you. We enter into fellowship of his sufferings. We tend to be, because of our humanness, Lord, I will follow you wherever you will have me to go, as long as it doesn't hurt, as long as it's easy. The lukewarm, right? Not on fire. These people, many weren't even of Israel, weren't true Jews in that sense, right? They go with David. That's amazing. They're genuine friends. David didn't have a lot of them. I remember watching this program on ESPN many years ago about this guy in the NFL, pretty well known, made a lot of money at the time, didn't invest it well, but he said when he was playing football, he made his millions. He said he had family members contacting him. He never even knew he had cousins from everywhere. He said he was taking people out to eat all the time. I mean, massive, great big family parties. Because I didn't know who half the people were, but they all said they were family. I didn't know about them before. As soon as the football was over and the money was gone, they were gone. They came and then they left. Fair weather friends. When David first became king, lots of people, they sang his praises. And now it's not so. Many of their hearts have turned. Listen, think of this. Since trials catch us by surprise, as one author put it, they reveal not so much the kind of people we think we are, but the kind of people we really are. These people in this passage of David were fair weather friends. Difficult days test us to prove whether we are fair weather friends or whether we are genuine friends of Christ. And so that's what's going on. All these people used to sing the praises of David until it wasn't going so well. I think we'll side with you see it in politics, I think I'll side with the winning party now, or whatever it is, instead of siding with just Christ. As we note the contrast between those who are surrendered and those that are lukewarm, those who are not surrendered, we note this young man, Ittai, that we just read about. And David even says, look, you just joined me yesterday. Go back to the palace. Go back to the city of David. Stay there. And he says, no, I'm going to go with you, whether in life or death. Even there also your servant shall be. That is remarkable. He just joined David the day before. He brings all of his friends, all of his family, even little kids. And David says, hey, go on and cross the Kidron. And he does. He's with them. This is really amazing. Someone said it this way. Let's get some faith lessons as we wrap up. They said it this way: true loyalty isn't proven until it costs you something to be loyal. Isn't that the truth? Look at verse 22 and 23 again. So David said to Ittai, go and cross over the Kidron, and Ittai the Gittite and all his men, And all the little ones who were with him, they crossed over, and all the country wept with a loud voice. These are who were following him, that is. And all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron, and all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness. Wow. The same brook Kidron that Jesus crossed when he was arrested in Gethsemane and taken before Caiaphas' house and then over to Pontius Pilate and put on the cross. Same brook Kidron. David crosses from the city of David, goes across brook Kidron, over Gethsemane, over Mount Olives, into the way of the wilderness, down through the Wadi Kelt, the other side of the Jordan, the way of the wilderness. Jesus is brought to the place of sacrifice, the opposite way across the Kidron Valley. From the wilderness, you could say, there on the Mount of Olives, Gethsemane, praying, if there be any other way, let this cup pass from me, but there's no other way. He is also brought across the Kidron Valley that we would be forgiven. Number one, true loyalty isn't proven until it costs you something to be loyal. Number two, be willing to be numbered with the few. Be willing to be numbered with the few. In Matthew chapter 7, beginning of verse 13, Jesus said, enter by the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. The men and women that followed David chose to follow him when it wasn't popular. They followed the king when he was rejected. They went with him, though the majority turned away. To put it another way, sometimes we have to lose what we think is ours in order to recognize that what we've always needed is a Savior. Everything else gets stripped away. Everything else gets stripped away. That's what's going on here. And they say, I'm following David anyways. Where are you in your relationship with Christ? Everything gets stripped away. Where are you, right? You look at that and you realize we need to lose all this other stuff in order to see this is what I need. I need a Savior. Number three, a final faith lesson is this. Victory is not you overcoming sin. Victory is Jesus overcoming you. As David and the people with him left the palace, they crossed over the Kidron Valley, would have headed up the Mount of Olives out into the wilderness. As I mentioned, the same Kidron that Jesus crossed when he was arrested and led away to be crucified reminds me of the words of Charles Spurgeon when he said, we don't want to cross the Kidron. David was and is known as the sweet psalmist of Israel, meaning he wrote poems and songs of praise and worship that are recorded in the book of Psalms. Out of the 150 Psalms that are in the Bible, it's estimated that David wrote about half of them. Other contributors, Moses, Asaph, sons of Korah, and others. Some Jews believe that David wrote all of the Psalms, but that doesn't seem to be an accurate assessment. But indeed, we are certain that he wrote just about half of them. But of David's Psalms, we know that several were written during his time of fleeing from Absalom. And likely even more. What we know for sure, Psalm 3, Psalm 41, Psalm 55, Psalm 61, 62, 63. I believe Psalm 4 was also written. Psalm 5 was also written. Psalm 4, I believe, was written at night when David was trying to rest when he's fleeing from Absalom. I believe Psalm 5 was written when David rose up in the morning and realized God had protected him. I believe Psalm 23 was written. You know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, when he is fleeing from Absalom. I'll show you why in a few more chapters. It really comes together. But regardless, we do know for certain that David wrote at least 6 Psalms during the time. In Psalm 62, beginning of verse 5, David wrote this Psalm while fleeing from Absalom. My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. So we think of that. And when we saw the time before, when Nathan had first called David out, when he sinned with Bathsheba, we saw Psalm 51 where David repented, and Psalm 32. Then we got to the story of Tamar and Amnon and Absalom. We didn't see God anywhere. And now that for years, remember the years that Absalom was in Geshur, and the 2 years before that, well, he plotted to kill Amnon, so that's several years there, plus the years he returned to Jerusalem and David wouldn't let him see his face. Several years went by, and you don't read about God anywhere in David's life during that time. Doesn't mean God wasn't there, obviously God was, but you don't read about this closeness with God until now at this part of the end when Absalom is pursuing to kill him. All of a sudden, David gets out that pen and starts writing like crazy again. And you see David's heart. Psalm 55 is another one that David wrote while he's fleeing from Absalom. Beginning of verse 1, give ear to my prayer, O God. Do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. So I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Remember, I opened up with that. David wished for a do-over, wished that it could just all be done, all gone away with. How often have we felt like that? Going through a pain, going through something, it's getting really ugly and you know it. Oh, I wish I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and I would be at rest. As we go, keep this in mind. Those who followed David followed him regardless of what the future promised. It didn't promise anything good of this world. Can you follow the Lord if you don't have promises of good in this world? They pledged to follow their king when everything was going wrong. They crossed the Kidron into the wilderness. Can you follow your king, Jesus, when everything is going wrong? When he says we're going into the wilderness. God is with you. And it's that place where David appears to be closer to God than he ever was before. God bless you. See you tomorrow.